the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
I've been preparing for this all my life.
Here's Porter on hard and taking him to school.
What a great play by Jae'Sean Tate.
K.J. Martin climbed Bobon Mountain.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
And you've seen tonight that we fought together, we stayed together, and it's about damn time, man.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rockets, the best and only daily podcast covering your Houston Rockets. As always, I am your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and partner at Apollo Media. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, as well as at Apollo HOU. And if you enjoy what we do here at Locked On Rockets, do me a favor, hit subscribe at our brand new YouTube channel. That's going strong. It's been really fun learning, getting used to that process, that workflow, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, you name it, hit the subscribe button. We would sincerely appreciate it. Now, today's episode, we want to remind you, we've got our NBA Draft live show, our Locked On live show with NBA GOAT Draft insider Chad Ford, as well as our NBA Draft host Rafael Barlow, and John Corrales will be hosting the show live in studio during the NBA Draft. It will be starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's brought to you by Built Bar. You can get your local expert analysis on every single pick. Follow Locked On NBA on YouTube today and watch our live coverage July 29th, again, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So today's show, I got a handful of reports coming out over the weekend, some interesting commentary from Cade Cunningham and Evan Mobley to a lesser extent with their respective media availability sessions this past Friday afternoon. And I guess that's probably a good place to start, is this really interesting quote out of Cade Cunningham, who during his media availability said, why is he only, worked out for the Pistons, right? And the response was, I wanted to meet with the team that had the number one overall pick because I feel like I'm the number one pick. If the Rockets go get the number one pick, I'll meet with them if there is enough time. So that quote, first off, is just confident as all hell, borderline arrogant or cocky or whatever you want to call it, because Cade truly believes he's the number one overall selection. So why would he bother, interviewing or working out for the team that doesn't hold all the cards at the number one spot? So kudos to him for having that level of self-confidence. But I don't like the way that quote kind of sounded because, I don't know, it doesn't sound great, right? And there is still that slight belief that the Pistons might hold Jalen Green in slightly higher regard than Cade Cunningham. And if there's a possibility where the Pistons do just say, you know what, we're just going to pick Green number one overall, the Rockets are definitely scooping Cade at number two. But I guess this is just one of those kind of like safety measure things that these top prospects kind of go through, where we're seeing it from the other top guys, right? Jalen Green has only worked out for the Pistons and Rockets. Evan Mobley hasn't worked out for the Pistons or the Rockets because his camp firmly believes that he's probably going at 3 or 4 to the Cavs or Raptors. So there's this whole, discussion, debate about what this quote kind of meant. And a lot of people took it in a negative light. I kind of just sat here and thought, okay, well, he's fully convinced he's going to the Pistons. And all the smoke right now is pointing at the top 4 prospects going down the pecking order in exactly how a lot of mock drafts have pegged it. So Cade Cunningham, number 1 overall, Jalen Green, number 2 overall, Evan Mobley, number 3, Jalen Suggs, number 4. That's how all the mock drafts are kind of shaking out right now. That's how ESPN's mock draft show decided to draft the top 4 prospects. And that's pretty much how I have this draft pegged as to how it's going to shake out at the end. Because right now, the Pistons have an asking price. And the Pistons and Rockets have definitely been engaged. As per Shams Charania of The Athletic, reporting that the Rockets are looking to trade up and secure the first overall pick, that they are actively pursuing that first overall pick. But the Pistons asking price is basically too high right now. And I commend Rafael Stone for not over leveraging himself and, foregoing so many of the assets that he's accumulated in his short time as the general manager. Because even though you might think Cade has that, true superstar potential, Jalen Green is just like right behind him as far as potential. So are the other guys, Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs. I think this is the draft where you're going to look at it and we're going to look back in, 5-10 years and be like, wow, there were 4 consensus, like every year in, year out all-stars in the top part of this draft. That's incredible. So I commend Rafael Stone because it feels like what's happening is the Pistons have set an asking price and it's too much. And Rafael Stone has come up with what he is willing to part with for that number 1 overall pick to trade up just one spot from number 2 to number 1. He's decided, this is what I'm willing to part with. And if you guys want to bite on this offer, great. We have a deal. We have an accord. If not, so be it. We are perfectly content with Jalen Green at number 2. And that's kind of where the Rockets are at right now. So is there still a chance that a trade materializes between the Pistons and Rockets? Absolutely. I'm not going to write it off yet until draft night is done, until we see Jalen Green, probably not even putting on the hat, right? Until draft night is over, until we make it to Friday morning and everything has been consummated, I'm not going to believe that, everything's set in stone until that coalesces, until that happens. So there's still that possibility there. As far off as it may seem now, Jalen Green to me is the Rockets guy. I think all the smoke points towards that. I think all the reports point towards that. And I think that some of this commentary from Cade Cunningham alludes to the fact that he strongly believes he is going to be a Detroit Piston. And it'll be really great as you're listening to this on a Monday morning, Monday afternoon. Jalen Green is going to be speaking to the media Monday afternoon, July 26th. So that'll be fun to hear what he has to say. I'll be sure to try and sneak in a question because I'll be joining that media session, which will be awesome. Get to hear what he has to say about where he's at throughout this whole draft process and, what he thinks about the Rockets. I'm sure that'll be a fun little session. But coming up, I do want to talk about another we've got a couple more reports here. I do want to focus on the Evan Mobley report as well. It kind of piggybacking off of this first segment, as well as the report, a secondary report around the Rockets and Pacers. And we're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at Built Bar. Because look, at the end of the day, if you've never had a protein bar that you actually care about, you need to try out Built Bar. It is the best protein bar on the market. The flavors, they're amazing, right? You cannot go wrong with them. German chocolate, raspberry, mint chocolate brownie, coconut brownie chunk, my personal favorite. Really can't go wrong with any one of these flavors. Every single bar is low cal, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. Great if you're on a keto diet. Great if you're trying to lose weight. Maybe you're just trying to stay where you're at. Maybe grab a couple Built Bars as you're heading out the door, running late for work in the morning. That's what I do. Or grab them as you're heading on the way to the gym. Whatever works for you, check them out. Go to BuiltBar.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your very next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's dive into and kind of a continuation of that first segment, just following up on the media availabilities from both Cade Cunningham and Evan Mobley, some of the other quotes coming out of those, and what is exactly going on with Evan Mobley and the fact that he hasn't worked out with either the Pistons or the Rockets, what that means going forward. Now, with these media availabilities, these guys, they've been trained, coached on how to, navigate these availabilities. And Evan Mobley was asked multiple times, what teams have you worked out for? Who have you, what can you say about this organization? And he dodged a lot of questions in his media availability. Cade, a little bit more open in his responses, a little bit more confident, showing that, he firmly believes he's going number 1 overall. I already read back that one really, the staple quote, I think, from his availability. But he also had good things to say about the Rockets. When asked about the Rockets organization, he said that Kevin Porter Jr. is starting to get things going. He looks like he's on track to have a great career. They have Christian Wood and some more guys getting comfortable being in the NBA. So, he had some praise for what the Rockets are doing. He said that they have young pieces you can build on, and being able to do that is important in this NBA. So Cade, leaping some praise on the Rockets, but not so much in a convincing way where, you walk away thinking, oh, he really wants to be on the Rockets. It was more so just, him playing the political game. I don't know. He's just being nice talking about the Rockets. But then you have Evan Mobley, who, basically, kind of dodged a lot of questions when asked specifically about his workouts. And then we have the subsequent report that he hasn't worked out for either the Pistons or the Rockets. And the Rockets haven't been able to secure a workout with Jalen Suggs either. So that doesn't exactly help things when you're the Rockets debating who they're going to take at number 2 overall. But I think some of that is just the side effect of some of the reporting that has gone on, some of the information that has leaked, that the Rockets are extremely high on Jalen Green and perfectly comfortable taking him number 2 overall. Because if you're Evan Mobley or if you're Jalen Suggs, why would you hurt your draft stock by having an individual workout with the Rockets and, potentially that information getting out? Or even worse, why would you risk hurting yourself, injuring yourself, whatever, which is very slim chance for that to happen in like an individual workout, but still, right? It's a risk that doesn't necessarily do anything. It doesn't move the needle for Evan Mobley or Jalen Suggs because they're more than likely going to the Cavaliers and Raptors respectively at 3 and 4. So I can see why they haven't bothered entertaining working out with the Rockets. And then also on Evan Mobley's behalf, even though the Pistons had some reported interest in Evan Mobley, it's very clear that Cade is likely their guy with a very slim chance that they might go Jalen Green instead, right? So because of all of that, even though the Pistons had some reported interest early on in Evan Mobley, it just wasn't enough for Mobley's camp to feel comfortable with him essentially wasting time doing a workout with the Pistons. So, I mean, it's all kind of like a political game at this point where, they're just like, they're playing, they're holding their cards close to their chest. They're playing it safe. They have, each of the top prospects, respective camps have a very firm idea of how things are going to shake out in this draft. So why risk anything negative happening by having them work out and have, again, injury, something bad happen, they lower their stock, what have you, front offices talk, right? If Evan Mobley has a bad workout with the Rockets, there's no way that information doesn't somehow probably make it out of the front office, and do its rounds, be it somebody reports and says, oh, Evan Mobley didn't look so great in the Rockets workout, right? Something like that could potentially happen. So that's why these guys, they're not working out. And looking down the line, some of these quotes from Evan Mobley, he did have a really strong quote. He said, I think I'll be a generational player that no one has really seen before. That's what I'm aspiring to be. I'm going to keep working and stay in the gym until I get there. So, Evan Mobley, he's kind of a soft-spoken dude. I kind of get that feel. Some of the answers to some of his questions were a little, less than stellar. Like he didn't blow me away in his media availability session. Like, until he gave that answer about, being, I think I'll be a generational player. And then he spoke on a little bit about his length, his agility, his ability to switch, talking about some of his physical traits and whatnot. I was a little bit impressed by those answers, but like, it wasn't the same as like Cade. Like Cade's media availability, I mean, he crushed it. From start to finish, he was, just leaps and bounds more, I don't want to say amenable. He was just more engaging, more charismatic. And I know that these are, those traits that people have read into with Evan Mobley. He's quiet, reserved, not, verbose, not as showy on the court, no emotion, whatever. I'm not trying to slam Evan Mobley for this. It's just an observation, right? Having sat in a Zoom meeting with him, answering questions for 20 minutes, just a minor observation on my behalf. And I'm trying to see if there's anything that, there it is. Okay, there's the other quote. Evan Mobley wants to be in the best situation possible. He said he would like to play alongside players like Christian Wood and thinks that it would be a cool fit. He did mention that the Rockets are a young athletic team and that he is young and athletic, so that is an exciting possibility. Those were kind of the extent of his comments on the Houston Rockets and what he had to say about their young core. Nothing nearly as complimentary as what Cade wound up saying. And again, it'll be interesting to see what Jalen Green has to say about the Rockets, given his, I guess, connections with Kevin Porter Jr. on social media, all those interactions back when Jalen Green was live and told Kevin Porter Jr., that'd be a scary backcourt, KP. So we'll see exactly how that happens. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what question or two I want to try and sneak in there for Jalen Green. But coming up, I do want to talk about this doubling down of the report between the discussions, or I should say the discussions between the Houston Rockets and Indiana Pacers. And we're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at betonline.ag, because BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. You got baseball season going strong. They've also got you covered for UFC, MMA, you name it. They've got it over at BetOnline. So don't sit on the sidelines anymore. It's time to get in on the action. And you can do that using promo code Locked On to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your very first deposit. Again, that's promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for a 50% welcome bonus on your very first deposit. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Now, we recently had that discussion talking about Eric Gordon and the report originally coming out of the Indy Star saying that the Rockets and Pacers had discussions about the 13th overall pick in this year's draft. And there were no names specifically of players that were mentioned in this original report from the Indy Star. However, everybody immediately jumped towards Eric Gordon, right? Indiana native. It made a lot of sense that Eric Gordon would be the guy that would potentially be moved. He doesn't fit with the Rockets timeline anymore at 32 years old. 32, 31? Is he 31 or 32? How old is EG? There we go, 32. I wasn't 100% sure if he was 31 or 32. So with Eric Gordon's name now circling back as a report out of Bleacher Report, Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, kind of doubling down on this report that the Rockets and Pacers have continued these discussions centered around Eric Gordon and the number 23 overall pick going to Indiana for the number 13 pick. And then in a subsequent line, immediately after the line talking about this, involving the Rockets Pacers, there was also a line talking about the Pacers gauging interest in one Miles Turner. Now, I don't think that these two are directly related to each other. I don't think it means and Eric Gordon and 23 for Miles Turner and 13, because that seems like an extremely lopsided deal in favor of the Rockets, honestly, at this point. It'd be cool. I'd be all for Miles Turner in Houston, but that's not how I'm reading this situation whatsoever. I think those are two kind of separate endeavors, because honestly, if the Rockets are able to move on from Eric Gordon and bring back a higher pick in this year's draft, if you're able to jump up 10 spots and move on from the contract of Eric Gordon, that is an absolute win. Like, I'm still trying to wrap my head around why this makes sense for Indiana. And Eric Gordon had a really good season last year, shot a career high inside the arc around like 57%, and looked to be playing some of the best basketball of his career up until the groin injury. But it's that injury that's a little bit, daunting, a little bit disconcerting, because conceivably you would think that the Pacers would want to see Eric Gordon in action a little bit more, make sure that he's healthy, make sure that he's still putting up the numbers that he was pre-injury. And that's where a lot of my concern has been regarding Eric Gordon this offseason is I still don't know how confident I am in Rafael Stone's ability to be able to offload Eric Gordon without giving up an abundance of assets to do so. Or, abundance, a couple picks, whatever. It's not going to be a haul to get rid of Eric Gordon. But still, I don't think that they should use draft capital just to move Eric Gordon, which has led me to be concerned about what do they do with rotation minutes next season. Because if you're going to have a backcourt of Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green that need to be getting 30 plus minutes a night to develop, where do you find the time to play John Wall? Where do you find the time to play Eric Gordon so that you can continue to build up the trade value of those guys and say, look, these guys can be contributing members to a winning culture, to a winning team. If Rafael Stone is able to move Eric Gordon in some capacity on draft night or just before draft night, and in this trade, this isn't using a pick to offload Eric Gordon. This is using a pick and Eric Gordon to move up 10 spots in a loaded draft class. I would be all for this trade. I think it makes sense with potentially like Jeremy Lamb's expiring contract coming back, and then you'd have to throw in, I believe, like one more, low tier salary if you're the Pacers to make this trade work. And the original reporting did mention that new Indiana head coach Rick Carlisle is looking for proven veteran players to be able to make a significant push with the Pacers this upcoming season immediately, right? So a draft pick at number 13 might be able to be a contributor right away, but the likelihood of that draft pick at 13 versus Eric Gordon, an already established presence, and a draft pick at 23, that is going to be more of an immediate contribution to a winning culture, to establishing, to kind of righting the ship in Indiana and setting the tone in Rick Carlisle's first season as head coach with the Pacers, rather than a project, at 13 that you're going to have to develop. And again, if you're the Pacers, you're still getting a shot at a prospect just 10 slots a little bit further down the line. Maybe the Pacers aren't super impressed with any of the available prospects at 13. And so they're trying to figure out how they can, again, bolster their roster right now and get an immediate impact player, a veteran who is obviously, Eric Gordon has done a lot in his time with the Rockets. He is a great two-way player. Offensively, he brings the entire package. He's a great shooter, great slasher, finisher, scorer, can be your sixth man, can be a starter. Defensively, he's locked down Chris Paul. He's locked down Donovan Mitchell. He has the ability to lock down guards defensively, especially in some of those deep postseason runs that the Rockets have had. His defense was invaluable to some of the playoff success of the Houston Rockets. So I think this is a strong deal for Indiana, and I'm really trying to remove my Rockets biases from here because, again, I don't think the jump in quality of prospect from 13 to 23 is so significant that you would, if you're the Pacers, that you would absolutely turn your nose up at the idea of also acquiring Eric Gordon and still walking away with a prospect that you'll be able to develop and groom and work while kind of making that development kind of a backseat towards the immediate goal of righting the ship, getting back to, being in the playoffs and having a successful playoff run under a really strong head coach in Rick Carlisle, because that's clearly what the Pacers are aspiring to do. Now, I'm trying to make sure if there's anything else from this report that I want to touch base on. Let's see. Other than, and I remember my original speculation on this report was maybe the Pacers were inquiring because the language in the original report said that the Pacers wanted, a player with multiple years left on their contract. And I posited that it might mean Christian Wood or possibly Jae'Sean Tate, guys who both have a couple years left on their deals and are a bit older, a little bit more established out of the Rockets' young core. Probably closer to their respective ceilings. You kind of know what you're getting out of those two guys, although I do still think both have, plenty of room to continue to grow and improve. But their floor, very high floor for both of those two guys. It doesn't seem like that's the case. And it doesn't seem like there's any inclination out of the Rockets front office or out of Rafael Stone that they have, explored ideas to move any of the Rockets' young core. Now, if I had to take I still don't think moving any of them is the right move just yet. I think it's too early to do that. And I still think that we're going to see a big step out of Kevin Porter Jr. this next season. I think Christian Wood has another gear that he can shift into. I think, again, the injury kind of derailed some of his progression this past season. So I'm excited to see him have a healthy offseason and come in this next season with a full-blown training camp with a proper roster around him. He's been with his head coach for a year now. I think Christian Wood's got room to improve. KJ Martin, showed some, exponential growth on the back half of last season after going down to the G League for a little while. So I think of those four guys, we're still going to see some more improvement out of them. So I think if you try to, cash in your chips on any of them right now, it's not the right move. I think that the right move to be able to potentially move on from any one of those four would be at the deadline at the earliest. And if there's a team that calls up and maybe says, hey, we're really interested in Christian Wood, and the Rockets, think that he doesn't exactly fit the timeline, or they'd rather focus on, a true reset of the timeline with their young, 20-year-old backcourt duo of potentially Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. If that's the move, if that's what they decide to do, I think that's probably a better timeline for things, to give Christian Wood, to give, those guys a little bit more time to showcase themselves, to develop a little bit further, because I don't think we've seen Christian Wood's ceiling at all. I think that he's still got a little bit more room to improve. And so trading, looking into making a move with him now would be selling low on Christian Wood. And I don't think that's the right move. So I like that we haven't heard anything out of the front office about potentially dealing one of those four guys yet. I'm not saying none of them are untradeable, but I just don't think it's the right time to move any of them quite just yet. So with that, I think it's going to be the end of today's episode. Now, we do have Ali Kambijani and I are going to be breaking down some of those prospects at 23-24 for the Rockets coming up a little bit later this week before the draft. Don't want to miss out on that. We had some scheduling issues last week, so we weren't able to get that show out, unfortunately, but we're going to have that one out. We're also going to be doing something in the way of like a live show, probably a live post-draft recap for the NBA draft. So as soon as everything concludes that evening on Thursday, be sure to tune back in. We'll probably go live, might have a guest, might have a couple guests as we go live and kind of break down what happened in the NBA draft, both for the Rockets and for everybody else in the NBA. But for today's show, that is going to do it. Be sure to listen to the Ultimate Mock Draft 2021 presented by Locked On and Odyssey, featuring analysis from the GOAT of NBA mock drafts himself, Chad Ford, and Odyssey NBA experts Brian Scalabrine and former general manager Ryan McDonough. It's the perfect way to get ready for the NBA draft. Our Locked On NBA local experts, hey, that's me, and others will make selections and trades for your favorite basketball teams throughout this week-long special event. Search the Ultimate Mock Draft 2021 on the new Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Odyssey is your audio home for all the sports, podcasts, music, and news that matter to you. That's Odyssey, AUDACY. As always, thank you so much for watching, for listening, and we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.